Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, August the 1st. So we say hello to the month of August, and I did change my calendar behind me. Sometimes I forget to do that when we change the month, and here I am broadcasting in 1 month with the calendar from last month. But there it is back there, August 2026, as we enter, uh, what could be another hot month of high temperatures. I don't know. Not in the next few days, though. As I understand, it's going to get a little cooler. And listen, I think we welcome that with open arms. I have a post over at the American Thinker today, and I've got another one coming out tomorrow about this border crisis in in Spain. If you're not familiar with it, a bunch of people. I think they were saying 60,000. I don't know if that's a real number, but there were lots of people who did cross into the Spanish territory from Morocco. And again, it was all unsupervised, all completely out of control, unregulated. So you got what you normally get when you have lawlessness and a bunch of people running to get into your country. You get what you got, and that's what we were watching in some of those videos. And the most obvious thing is that these people were threatening the locals. I saw this interview with a woman who was almost crying, talking about how these people were threatening her. Then I saw another video of looting going on. Again, it's complete lawlessness. It's the kind of thing, honestly, that we see in Chicago from time to time. That's what it reminded me of. All these young people running around like crazy in the city of Chicago. That's what this reminded me of. And then of course the other thing that reminded me, and that's why I talk about in my post, is that it reminded some of us of what almost happened in Del Rio, Texas, where you had people on the other side trying to come in. But here, of course, we had a governor who was willing to step up and put down his foot and put the National Guard in place. That obviously was very helpful in keeping this situation from turning into France or Spain. And over in Spain, of course, they have a president or a prime minister who's frankly worthless. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but he's not very effective. And he had a lot to do. His policies have a lot to do with what we're seeing. The policies that they implemented, and on one hand, they need people. On the other hand, they're legalizing people in the country because they say they need people. Okay, I can understand that. But there's got to be a better way to do it. You can't just allow people to come in. So it was complete chaos in Spain. And as I mentioned in my post coming out Sunday, the Spanish government is now talking about building a fence, what they call a barrier. I guess they don't want to call it a fence because they don't want to have the association with President Trump, particularly the prime minister from the left, who is about as anti-Trump as they get uh, over there in Europe. But he doesn't want to call it a fence, I guess. So they call it a barrier so that people cannot come in. Same thing, of course, as a fence. It works sort of the same way. It keeps people out. But the fact that they're installing that, the fact that they're installing some kind of a barrier, tells you just how much of a mess this had become for the Spanish government, and a mess it is. I was watching some of the local politicians talk about this. They're not very happy with the prime minister. I was watching some of the news coming out of Spain. Some of the politicians they're talking, they're not very happy with the prime minister. And people marching down the streets, they're not very happy with the prime minister either. In fact, they have some words uh, for the prime minister that honestly you couldn't say. You couldn't say here on this channel. So it was a total complete disaster what we saw in Spain. And again, another indication of what happens when you go totally lawlessness and you don't have any rules. Now, interesting thing is what I mentioned about this fence, and that's going to apparently go up as fast as they can put it up. they don't call it a fence. They call it some kind of a barrier, but they don't want to call it a fence. And I know why. They don't want to be associated with President Trump, particularly the Prime Minister of Spain. But I think overall, the other thing they're doing is that they've created this mess in Europe, because now you have a bunch of other countries. They want to have an urgent meeting and they want to talk about this, because if these people come in this way, once they get into the country, they can go anywhere in Europe. I mean, you can travel pretty easily in Europe. So they don't want to allow these people to travel like that. And Spain, I think Italy has already announced that they're closing the border to Spain, or from anything from Spain. Other countries have made similar announcements. But the bottom line is that this policy of immigration, of what I would call lawless immigration, is what has the continent right now reeling like this. And look, I feel sorry for the people in that town in Spain, Quetta. I feel terrible for them, because their lives have been turned upside down, particularly the small, shops or restaurants or businesses. Their lives have been turned upside down. And how much money is it going to cost to rebuild? I don't know. But there are already people who are being interviewed saying that the loss to the city is tremendous, not just economically, but also emotionally. So I don't know what to say other than the government of Spain has to wake up and realize that there's a bunch of people who want to move into the country, and it has nothing to do with Spanish culture. In fact, these people hate the West, and they just want to get in there and simply, destroy the West. That's all that it is. They want to destroy our way of life, which is, of course, the Western way of life. I should say quickly that there was an incident in a Seattle basketball game. Now, this is the WNBA, the Women's League, where a couple of young girls went to the game with placards supporting Sophie Cunningham. She's the young woman in the WNBA who came out in defense of only women playing with women in sports. She said it was just biological reality. And that has created all kinds of controversy. I mean, it's ridiculous. An issue that has 90% approval from the American people has become so controversial, it's hard to believe. But one of the owners of the Seattle team got into an argument with a couple of 15-year-olds who were simply holding placards telling people how much they love Sophie Cunningham, who is one of the outspoken players and the one who said that marriage is between a man and a woman, and little girls should not be playing with men and all of that. She's created this terrible controversy about something that isn't controversial at all. And the semi-owner or I guess minority owner of the Seattle team has been suspended for 5 games for treating the girls like that. But look, I think this WNBA league has to look at its culture and look at what's going on inside the WNBA, because they're not making fans, they're losing fans. Let me repeat, they're losing fans. And until they come to terms with that reality, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. And, I keep thinking that Caitlin Clark should just start her own league. Just, I'm sure there's going to be some investors who'll be willing to set up a league with her, independent of the WNBA, a league that actually focuses on basketball and not social justice. And they should go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. And I think she would do quite well. All those young fans, a lot of young girls who are out there cheering Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham, those girls, I'm sure, would take their allegiances to another team or another league if they decided to. But the league is treating these young women very poorly, whether it's Caitlin Clark or Sophie Cunningham. And to go after a couple of teenage girls who were just having some fun at the arena, to go after them and have an adult go after them the way we saw on the video, it's pretty obscene. It really tells you that the person who has a problem is the adult, not the not the young girls who are simply doing what fans do, which is to support one player or one team or another. Well, with respect to Iran, something is going to happen. All kinds of talk about a very significant attack. Look, I think that we have now reached the point, and we're going to get into more of this with Bill Katz when we speak with him on Monday or Tuesday. But we've now reached the point, what I would call the Hiroshima point. Hiroshima, of course, was one of the two cities in Japan that we bombed with a nuclear weapon in 1945. I'm not suggesting that we use a nuclear weapon. That's not what I mean about a Hiroshima moment. But Hiroshima moment means that it's time for us to end this war dramatically and to simply destroy Iran, destroy it completely, and pick up the pieces. And I have a feeling that if we did that, it's going to succeed quite a bit. I think Trump is the kind of president who would do it because he'll focus on destruction, he'll focus on winning, and that's the important part here. But it's time to go in and finish this. It's been going on too long, and I think we need a resolution as soon as possible. And that resolution has to be victory. That's what we're talking about, victory. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.